Hello there. I've been thinking about Buddhist lists. As you know, there's a lot of lists in Buddhism, and that is because at the time of the Buddha, of course, nothing was written down, and people had to remember the Dharma in other ways, and that was by lists. I'm going to talk about two lists that in my mind, I've put them together this morning. So one is the five precepts, the five Buddhist precepts, and the other is what is sometimes called the hindrances that we learn about when we learn meditation. So, why I think it's good to bring these two together is because usually we think about the hindrances in terms of meditation, and we think about the five precepts more in the terms of our everyday life. So let's start with the first Buddhist precept, which is, with deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. So loving kindness, not to harm living beings and certainly not to kill. So what do we notice when we learn to meditate? Well, we come to see that actually there's quite a lot of aversion in our mind. It may be extreme in terms of, anger, resentment, remembering, there we are meditating and we remember all sorts of arguments we've had or things we don't like, or perhaps it's just a sense that, we're uncomfortable and why didn't somebody close the window because we're cold? So all those thoughts, all those, even however brief they are examples of our aversion. And so when we're practicing loving kindness, particularly we can see this in the Metta Bhavana, we discover much more about how our mind is generally. And we start seeing that aversion. And one reason that we do the Metta Bhavana is so that we come to not accept in a passive way, but we come to see how we are and find a place of love in our own hearts, first of all, for ourselves. So it's really important. We're only going to be aware to the extent that we can be honest about what is in our mind. So it's important that we come to a point where we're not criticizing what's there in our mind, We're not saying it shouldn't be there. It's like we're human, and that's what is in our mind. And yeah, as I often say, we need a sense of humour about that. It's like these thoughts turn up and it's like, oh, there's that one again, So, yeah, these two go together very well. Seeing aversion, seeing how our mind does throw up all sorts of aversive thoughts, and practicing loving kindness, doing the Metta Bhavana, and bringing those two together. So moving on to the second precept, which is about generosity. With open-handed generosity, I purify my body. Open-handed. And of course the corresponding hindrance is craving. So we have both craving and aversion in our experience. So there we are meditating, and craving turns up in all sorts of ways. Maybe we hope the meditation is going to be over soon because we want a cup of tea. Maybe we're having sexual fantasies. Maybe we're thinking of going shopping later and all the things we can buy. Craving turns up in all sorts of ways, doesn't it? And this is another aspect of our mind that we see when we meditate. So just a reminder, that in meditation, we're not trying to get rid of thoughts. We're trying to become more aware of what is actually in our mind. So this is a pair, isn't it? Craving and aversion. We're always wanting something and not wanting other things. And the teaching that shows us that very clearly, of course, is the 8 worldly winds. That we know we want pleasant, not unpleasant. We want comfort, not pain. We want to be praised and not blamed, and so on. So, we can see how our dualistic way of thinking means that all the time we have got craving and aversion in our mind. So those two go together. So then the third of the precepts is with stillness, simplicity, and contentment, I purify my body. So I've put with that one the hindrance of anxiety. And pairing those is quite interesting. So the other side of the precept to stillness, simplicity, and contentment is to abstain from sexual misconduct. So that is a very strong drive in us, the craving for a sexual relationship, for much of our lives anyway. And it is the source of a lot of anxiety because it leads to us comparing ourselves with others, being quite desperate for attention, competition, jealousy, and just wanting to be sexually attractive to whoever we're attracted to. And, particularly when we're young, it occupies a lot of our life and leads to a lot of anxiety. So stillness, simplicity, contentment is it's aspects of our experience that we do definitely develop within meditation. It's quite hard to learn even to be still, isn't it? We fidget about, we want to get up. We're not used to being still unless we're asleep. And contentment, the society that we live in here in the West certainly does not encourage contentment. It encourages us to want more and more, to be dissatisfied so that we're always on the lookout. So yes, the messages we get is that, if you're bored with your sexual partner, well, just get a different one. It doesn't teach us to practice patience or tolerance or really practice intimacy, which is a practice in itself, actually committing ourselves to a relationship where we can get to know somebody more and more deeply so that passion becomes something much more valuable. I mean, passion is over very quickly. And relationships, if they're going to last, have to develop into something else. And, it's easy to see that something else as just something boring, and so we'll go and get something more interesting or try something new. But actually, there's much more satisfaction in something deeper. Getting to know someone is a lifetime's work. We never really know another person. So moving on now to truthful speech. So that's the fourth of the 5 precepts. With truthful communication, I purify my speech. And I've linked this one actually to sloth and torpor. And the reason that I've done that is because I think a lot of our speech is not very carefully thought out. It's laziness. So that in that aspect of sloth and torpor, a kind of laziness, an inability to care about what we say. And I'm relating this, I'm thinking now particularly of social media, where a lot of unpleasantness arises, basically because there are faster and faster responses to what we see and what we hear. And it means that we get very lazy. We don't think about the effect on the other person. And as you know, it can cause devastating harm to other people, even to suicide, and to people having very low self-esteem. And it's because it's so easy to say nasty things, even easier on the internet than it is in person. Well, much easier. Perhaps things that get said on social media we wouldn't actually say to the person, but you know they can't see it and it's very fast. So, but quite apart from social media, often we don't think before we speak, and that is a kind of laziness. You know, we just have instant responses without thinking of the consequences. Okay, so that's that pair. And then finally, the fifth of the precepts, of course, is mindfulness. With mindfulness clear and radiant, I purify my mind. So, yeah, this is about broadening our awareness, and I have linked this to the final one of the 5 hindrances, which is doubt or indecision or even avoidance. It's a kind of ignorance, really, because, well, in terms of doubt, it means that we doubt our ability to meditate. We undermine ourselves with all sorts of self-criticisms, low self-esteem, and that leads to indecision. You know, we can't decide, do we really want to commit ourselves to anything? And mindfulness is about opening our awareness, in a way making our awareness more fine, more what's the word I'm looking for? Certainly more substantial, but more sensitive, more open-eyed, so that we really see how things are, bringing attention to. And if we really bring attention to our environment, to other people and to ourselves, we won't so much want to avoid those aspects of ourselves that maybe are a little darker, a little deeper. So I think mindfulness certainly works against this hindrance of doubt, of indecision, of avoiding ourselves and avoiding the world. So I think it's quite interesting, you know, looking at some of these lists and finding different ways to contemplate them. So those are my thoughts today. Bye for now.